Hey y'all, it is February 2nd, 020925, and this is week 3 of the video blog YouTube series 52-week challenge, and let's dive in. So this week, some of the biggest lessons and takeaways probably was, a lot came from, Rebecca and I went to a Rachel Hollis reading in Austin at Book People. It was spectacular. As always, she's an amazing human and writer. And I think some of our biggest takeaways, or at least my biggest takeaways, were focusing on like the one thing. And that's something that Gary Keller said, and he wrote a whole book on it. But basically it's something that a bunch of people have talked about. You know, you have a whole list of different things that are competing for your interests, but what's the one thing that's going to make all those things redundant, or the one thing that, you know, when you're on your deathbed at some point, hopefully far, far in the future, that you'll look back on and be proud of over all the other things, and you won't even remember the rest. And that wasn't so revelatory as the other thing, as like the piece that goes with that, and the fact that it's like, you don't need any more ideas. Like, you don't need a bigger list of things. You just need to focus on the one thing. And for this, like, this cropped up this week that, you know, had a ton of stuff going on. So firefighting, studying, like setting up some like financial stuff, like figuring out some health things, like working on some immigration stuff, reading like 4 different books, not all at the same time, but a lot of them I tend to read like a fiction book and a nonfiction book, but I've been reading like 2 nonfiction books, 1 fiction book, and like listening to a bunch of different podcasts, and then going to the gym and all this other stuff. Like, life is busy, right? And it's like, in that busyness, there becomes this excuse on, like, there's a safety in like having so many things going on and so many options and so much busyness in our lives, of why we're not actually taking the time to like dedicate to writing. Like this week in writing, I only got to write like 8 hours, 8, maybe 9. I'd have to double check the Excel sheet. This is why we track. So yeah, just like looking at that and being like, all right, like what's the main thing, and how can you keep that main thing the main thing? And that one main thing actually takes everything else off the table. Like, I know for me, like if I show up and write, I tend to be a way happier and fulfilled person. I show up better in my relationships. I show up better in all the other work that I do. I'm more present, more grounded, more patient, more joyful. And so I know like this is one of the main things that everything else is built on top of. But if I'm trying to do all these other things and writing actually doesn't happen. And so something for me was figuring out like, oh, I listen to all these podcasts, I do all these other things. It's like, really, it's like, just do the writing. And then, like, you don't have to not do all the other stuff. Like, we do have other obligations. We do have things that we have to get done. Like, probably should go to the grocery store and buy food if you're out of food, right? Like, probably should do some meal prep if you want to be healthy and eat well. So you got to make time for that. But can you do that in a way that still supports the main thing? So can you do that main thing first? Can you cut out time in your day where you're like, this is happening, none of these other things are as much a priority as that? And so it's not using other options and like all these other ideas for, you know, for stories, for example. Like at one point I was like not working on Undead Ink because I was super stoked about working on this other idea, and then I had a bunch of other ideas for different stories, and then you're like kind of popping around to all these easy things, and when one gets hard, you're like, I'm going to switch to this other thing. So it becomes this self-fulfilling, cyclical, like kind of detrimental capacity, because you're like, oh, I'm not making headway on Undead Ink, so let me work on this other thing that I am making headway on, but you're not making headway on the one main thing that you should be, because you're working on all these other things, when if you actually just, instead of worked on these things, just focused on the main thing, like that would get pushed along farther. And so, yeah, just thinking about like how to show up more and keeping the main thing, and like what is the actual true priority, and like that grounding of like, you know, Rachel Hollis said this, like her hero is her like 85-year-old self, who's like old, doesn't give a shit what other people think, just the people that she loves, and, you know, really understands like doesn't seek external validation, but has the internal validation of knowing what she wants to do and being true to herself, and like whatever that may look like. And like, what's that for you? You know, like for me, it's like showing up and writing the book, and then like doing these other things as well. And so it's like, how do you keep that main thing the main thing while still showing up in all these other capacities, like studying for firefighting, showing up and going and doing workouts, showing up and doing the meal prep, showing up and like, you know, taking care of the kids, like picking them up from the school, like, you know, taking people to the doctor. Like, how do you get all these other life things done, like paying your taxes, while still keeping the main thing, and like making that the main priority, and not having like expectations for trying to accomplish all these other things actually drag you down, because when you spread yourself so thin, you're actually just paddling in a circle, instead of actually like making headway in one single direction and seeing results. And that's where, like, circling back to the whole tracking thing, is like, when you see results, like those results from that commitment create more motivation. So it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle, and this self-fulfilling engine that feeds upon itself. And so with like writing, it's like, oh, if I see I'm stacking up more hours, like if one day I write like, you know, 3-4 hours, then the next day I am 100%, if not more likely, to write at least that amount of time, you know, if there is time in the day to do that. But I'm more likely to make time in the day and make that the focus, because you've created this momentum from seeing results that you want to mimic that as well. And as you focus in and see results in one category go up, it's not like everything else is put on the wayside and not happening as well. Actually, from that one thing, from the main thing that you do, it should, and this is an indicator too of like, is this actually the main thing? Because whenever you focus on one thing that actually is the true priority, that is your dream that you're trying to accomplish with like writing, for example, every other aspect and factor and category in my life also rise up as well. So it's not like you're not working on that by focusing on just the one thing, but figuring that out. So yeah, I mean, my thing this week has been focusing on taking what things can I peel out that are non-essential, because right now it's all about firefighting, studying for firefighting, getting ready for that, and writing. Everything else gets peeled back while still showing up in my relationship, while still walking our dog, like being kind to myself, but peeling back the podcast some, peeling back the nonfiction reading, peeling back the fiction reading, you know, keeping that the main focus for now, because I know it's not forever, but it is this next step. And then realizing that, yeah, sometimes you just have to quit faster on things that, you know, aren't working. If you have like a huge list of stuff and then you want to try and you're not sure which one it is, you probably do, but it's probably the thing that you're most afraid of doing. But like, take them one at a time. You know, if you have 10 story ideas, we'll try writing 10 different stories and seeing, but give yourself a time limit, right? Like, how can you make this and quit faster and then test out other things as quickly as possible? So yeah, that's been the main focus this week, is like dialing things back and saying no a lot more, and being no is being the most important thing, because the things we say no to means with the things that we do say yes to are going to be that more impactful.